Fawn, hey guys. Tonight you drift slowly through the peaceful world of ancient Persian gardens where water whispers through marble channels, cypress trees stand like quiet guardians, and every path seems designed to gently convince your exhausted brain to finally unclench for 5 minutes. The desert air outside still carries the heat of the day, but beyond these stone walls lies a carefully crafted paradise of shade, perfume, and soft flowing fountains. Somewhere in the distance, a nightingale sings with suspicious confidence, while you step across cool mosaic tiles, wondering how people thousands of years ago somehow understood relaxation better than most modern wellness apps. And honestly, after one afternoon crossing the Persian plateau, wearing layered robes in 40-degree heat, you would probably collapse dramatically beside the first fountain like a Victorian poet with low blood sugar. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in tonight, tell me your local time and where you're listening from. I always love seeing how far these sleepy journeys travel across the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The garden gate opens quietly before you. At once, the world changes. Outside the walls, the Persian landscape stretches dry and sunburned beneath fading twilight. Dust hangs over distant roads. Rocky hills glow faintly bronze beneath the sinking sun. But inside the garden, everything softens. Moisture cools the air. Trees gather overhead. Water reflects the sky in long silver ribbons. You step onto a narrow pathway lined with pale stone. The scent reaches you first. Rosewater, jasmine, damp earth, cypress resin warming slowly in the evening heat. Persian gardens are not accidental collections of plants. They are carefully engineered emotional experiences. Every tree, fountain, pool, wall, breeze, and shadow serves a purpose. The ancient Persians create gardens not merely for beauty, but for psychological relief. These spaces are designed to calm the spirit, cool the body, and create a sense of cosmic harmony. In fact, the very word paradise comes from an old Persian term referring to enclosed royal gardens, which means every overpriced luxury apartment complex calling itself Paradise Residency is technically borrowing ancient imperial branding. You continue deeper into the garden while lanterns flicker softly beneath archways. The paths divide into geometric patterns, crossing through channels of flowing water. This style becomes known as the Chahar Bagh, or four-part garden design, one of the most influential landscape concepts in world history. The garden symbolizes order imposed upon chaos. Water divides the grounds into balanced quadrants representing harmony, fertility, and the structured beauty of creation itself. The design later influences Islamic gardens across vast regions, eventually shaping famous places from Mughal India to Andalusian Spain. Historians are still debating whether the earliest Persian paradise gardens were primarily political symbols of royal control over nature or spiritual reflections of divine cosmic order. Standing here tonight, it honestly feels like both. Ahead of you, servants quietly light small oil lamps beside a reflecting pool. The water remains perfectly still, mirroring the deepening indigo sky overhead. Cypress trees rise along the edges like dark green flames. Persians admire cypress trees for their elegance and symbolism. They represent endurance, dignity, and eternal life. Unlike many fruit trees bending with heavy branches, cypresses grow upright and calm, as though they have personally decided not to participate in unnecessary drama. A cool breeze passes through the garden corridor. You immediately understand why these spaces matter so deeply. In the brutal heat of many Persian regions, gardens become survival as much as luxury. Temperatures during the day can feel relentless, yet through careful engineering, shade placement, water movement, and airflow management, Persian architects create astonishingly comfortable environments long before modern air conditioning. Honestly, the ancient engineers here would probably look at modern office buildings made entirely of glass and quietly ask if everyone had collectively lost their minds. You hear flowing water nearby and follow the sound toward a long marble channel cutting through the center of the garden. Tiny ripples shimmer beneath lantern light. The sound is delicate but constant. The Persians understand something modern neuroscience now confirms. Gentle natural sound reduces stress. Water is life in the Persian world. It cools the air, reflects beauty, nourishes plants, creates music, signals wealth and power. In dry climates, flowing water feels almost magical. Royal gardens often feature elaborate hydraulic systems carrying water across great distances through underground channels and aqueducts. And tonight, beneath the first stars of evening, the water speaks softly everywhere around you. You pass beneath a vine-covered trellis where grapes hang in shadowy clusters overhead. Nearby, figs ripen beside pale stone benches. Fruit trees are common in Persian gardens, blending practicality with pleasure. Shade, fragrance, and nourishment coexist naturally. Several noble guests stroll quietly through the pathways in loose flowing garments. Conversation remains soft. Nobody rushes. Persian elite culture often values poetry, reflection, music, and intellectual conversation within garden settings. These spaces become extensions of philosophy itself, places where rulers, scholars, astronomers, and poets gather to think clearly away from crowded cities. One elderly man reclines beside the water while a servant fans him gently with peacock feathers. Honestly, it is difficult not to respect the commitment to relaxation. In the distance, you glimpse the silhouette of a pavilion rising above the trees. Open arches allow night air to pass freely through the structure. Lamps glow inside like floating amber stars. The scent of roses grows stronger now. Persians cultivate roses extensively, not only for beauty but for perfume and ceremonial use. Rosewater becomes deeply woven into Persian daily life, cuisine, hospitality, and spiritual traditions. Even tonight, attendants sprinkle rosewater lightly onto stone pathways to freshen the evening air. You kneel beside the reflecting pool. The water feels cool against your fingertips. Above you, the first true stars appear. The garden quiets further as night deepens. Birds settle into trees. Distant city noises fade beyond thick garden walls. Somewhere nearby, a musician softly plucks strings on a setar, each note lingering gently in the warm darkness. For a moment, you almost forget the outside world exists at all. And perhaps that is exactly the point. The Persian garden is not simply decoration. It is refuge, a carefully designed escape from heat, noise, dust, politics, exhaustion, and the endless unpredictability of ordinary life. Even centuries later, beneath the scent of jasmine and the hush of flowing water, you can still feel that purpose surrounding you like the cool night air itself. Fun 2. The coolness beside the marble channel lingers against your skin as you continue deeper into the garden. Behind you, the lanterns near the entrance fade into soft golden dots, while ahead the pathways narrow beneath rows of cypress and plane trees. Water moves everywhere here, not loudly, never aggressively, just a constant silver murmur threading through the night like the world's most expensive sleep soundtrack. You follow the sound instinctively. The Persians understand that flowing water changes the atmosphere of a place long before scientists begin measuring stress hormones and heart rates. In a land where heat can press down like a physical weight, water is not merely practical, it is emotional relief, spiritual relief, social relief. And tonight, as warm desert air drifts above the garden walls, the channels of water turn the entire space into a carefully engineered sanctuary. You pass beneath an archway tiled in deep turquoise and white geometric patterns. Moisture clings faintly to the stone. Tiny droplets gather along the edges of carved fountains. The scent of wet limestone mixes with mint and jasmine. Honestly, modern luxury spas would charge alarming amounts of money to recreate this exact mood while serving cucumber water in tiny glasses. Ahead of you, the central waterway widens into a shallow, reflecting basin. Moonlight spills across its surface in soft, trembling patterns. Several attendants kneel nearby, cleaning fallen petals from the water using fine copper nets. The care given to these gardens borders on sacred devotion. Persian rulers invest enormous resources into hydraulic engineering to sustain such spaces. Water often travels vast distances through qanats, underground tunnels that transport groundwater from mountain aquifers across dry landscapes. These systems require extraordinary planning, labor, and maintenance. Historians are still debating whether the spread of Persian gardens across ancient empires depended more on military expansion or on the prestige associated with Persian engineering and luxury culture. Either way, one glance at this place explains why neighboring civilizations immediately thought, yes, we would also like our cities to feel less like being roasted alive. You crouch beside the basin. The water is startlingly cold. Even after hours of darkness, the channels continue carrying coolness through the garden. Persian designers intentionally use narrow waterways to maximize airflow and evaporation. Moving air passing over water lowers surrounding temperatures naturally. It is ancient climate control. And unlike modern office air conditioning, nobody here is secretly fighting over the thermostat settings. A servant carrying a bronze oil lamp passes quietly beside you. The light dances across mosaic tiles arranged in repeating star patterns. Geometry appears everywhere in Persian design. Symmetry creates balance. Repetition calms the eye. Order brings peace to the mind. You continue walking along the central channel as tiny ripples reflect moonlight onto nearby walls. The shifting patterns look almost alive. In some Persian gardens, fountains are carefully designed to produce different sounds depending on water pressure and basin shape. Some splash lightly, others hum softly. Some create rhythmic dripping echoes beneath vaulted ceilings. The soundscape itself is curated. You pause near a low pavilion where several noble guests recline on cushions beside the water. Bowls of sliced melon, grapes, and pomegranates rest nearby. A young musician plucks delicate notes from a santur while conversation drifts lazily through the cool night air. Nobody seems hurried. No one glances nervously at a glowing screen every 40 seconds. Frankly, the emotional stability here feels suspicious. One elderly scholar dips his fingers into the channel absent-mindedly while discussing poetry with another guest. Persian garden culture often intertwines with intellectual life. These are places for reflection, debate, music, philosophy, romance, and diplomacy. In many ways, the garden functions as a physical expression of civilized order. Beyond the pavilion, the water narrows again and disappears beneath a carved stone wall. You follow its path through a shaded corridor lined with flowering shrubs. Night-blooming jasmine releases stronger fragrance now that the air has cooled. Crickets sing invisibly among the leaves. You notice how carefully the sounds layer together. Water, wind, insects, soft footsteps, distant strings. Nothing overwhelms the senses. Everything invites the body to relax. Persian architects and gardeners deeply understand sensory balance. Shade softens light. Water softens heat. Fragrance softens thought. Symmetry softens mental tension. Even the placement of trees often guides airflow intentionally through enclosed courtyards and corridors. Centuries later, many modern therapeutic garden designs unknowingly echo these same ancient principles. You emerge into a smaller courtyard where a narrow fountain spills gently into overlapping stone basins. The water descends level by level in tiny silver curtains. A child nearby reaches out to touch the stream while his mother quietly laughs and pulls him back before he drenches himself completely. Some aspects of human civilization truly never change. The little boy points upward excitedly toward the moon reflected in the basin below. And suddenly you understand another purpose behind these reflecting pools. They bring the sky downward. In Persian thought, gardens often symbolize paradise, not merely abundance, but harmony between heaven and earth. Reflection pools double the beauty of the night sky. Stars shimmer both above and below. The universe feels closer somehow. A cool gust of wind drifts across the courtyard, carrying moisture from the fountains. For a moment, the entire garden breathes. You close your eyes briefly and listen. The water masks distant noises from outside the walls. This effect is intentional too. Continuous flowing sound creates privacy and tranquility. Even in busy royal complexes, the gardens feel secluded. Some Persian rulers conduct sensitive political discussions while strolling beside water, specifically because the sound helps conceal conversation. Which means ancient fountains occasionally function as extremely elegant white noise machines for imperial gossip. You continue toward the far side of the courtyard where carved stone benches sit beneath tall cypress trees. Their dark silhouettes barely move in the night breeze. One garden attendant kneels nearby adjusting a bronze pipe feeding the fountain. The hydraulic systems require constant maintenance. Water pressure must remain balanced. Channels must stay clear. Basins need cleaning. Entire teams of workers dedicate their lives to preserving these landscapes. Without them, paradise dries quickly. The attendant notices you watching and smiles faintly before returning to his work. Behind him, the fountain continues its endless quiet song. The moon climbs higher. The air cools further. And somewhere beyond the garden walls, the desert remains vast, dry, and unforgiving, making every drop of water here feel even more precious than gold. Have Fun 3. The fountain's soft rhythm follows you as you leave the courtyard behind. Water still whispers through hidden channels beneath the pathways, but now another presence slowly takes over the garden. Fragrance. At first it drifts lightly through the air, almost impossible to separate from the cool breeze itself. Then gradually the scents deepen around you. Jasmine, rose, orange blossom, hyacinth, narcissus. The night garden is waking up. During the burning heat of the Persian afternoon, many flowers retreat beneath the sun, like exhausted aristocrats avoiding unpleasant social obligations. But after sunset, the garden transforms. Petals open wider. Perfume intensifies. Entire pathways begin to breathe sweetness into the darkness. And honestly, if modern perfume companies could bottle this exact night air, half the population would immediately go financially irresponsible. You walk beneath a wooden trellis, draped in climbing roses. Tiny lanterns glow softly among the leaves, casting warm flickers across pale petals. Some blossoms appear almost silver beneath the moonlight. Others hold faint shades of crimson and gold. Persian gardeners understand something subtle but important. A garden should not overwhelm the senses all at once. Instead, beauty unfolds gradually. A cool corridor, then fragrance, then water, then shadow, then moonlight reflected in marble. The experience moves like music. Ahead of you, several noblewomen stroll slowly beside a line of flowering shrubs. Their robes trail softly over stone pathways while servants carry small oil lamps nearby. Evening walks through the garden become a beloved ritual among Persian elites, especially during warmer months when daytime heat finally loosens its grip after sunset. The gardens are social spaces, but not loud ones. Voices remain gentle here. Even laughter feels softened by leaves and water. One young attendant scatters fresh rose petals into a shallow pool. The petals drift slowly across the surface like tiny boats. Rose cultivation becomes deeply associated with Persian culture for centuries. Persian distillation techniques eventually helped spread rosewater and perfume traditions far beyond the region. Historians are still debating whether some early Persian fragrance-making methods directly influenced later perfume traditions across the Mediterranean and South Asia through trade networks. Considering how aggressively humans everywhere pursue pleasant smells, the answer is probably yes. You pause beside a circular flower bed where white jasmine blooms heavily beneath the night sky. Their fragrance grows strongest after dark because many night-pollinating insects become active during cooler evening hours. Persian gardeners intentionally cultivate plants that perform best at night, designing gardens not just for daytime beauty, but for nocturnal calm. This place is built for evening relaxation, not accidental relaxation. Engineered relaxation. You inhale slowly, the air smells alive. Nearby, mint leaves release sharp freshness beneath your fingertips as you brush against a low herb border. Persian gardens often blend ornamental beauty with practical plants. Herbs, medicinal flowers, fruit trees, and aromatic shrubs all coexist within carefully balanced layouts. A gardener kneels quietly beside an irrigation channel, adjusting the soil around several lilies. Even at night, maintenance continues. These gardens require constant attention. Water levels shift. Plants need trimming. Soil must remain fertile in climates that naturally resist lush growth. Creating paradise in the middle of arid land is not simple. It is daily work. You continue walking while the pathways narrow between thick hedges of flowering myrtle. Somewhere nearby, hidden birds rustle softly in the branches preparing for sleep. A breeze carries cool moisture across your face. And then you notice the walls. High garden walls surround the entire paradise, now separating it from the harsher outside world. They provide privacy, security, shade, and climate control. But symbolically, the walls matter too. Inside the garden exists order, abundance, water, fragrance, beauty. Outside lies dust, heat, uncertainty. The contrast is intentional. Persian gardens become living demonstrations of civilization itself, triumphing over environmental hardship. A small pavilion appears ahead, open on all sides to allow airflow through its arches. Cushions rest beside low marble tables, holding trays of figs, pistachios, almonds, and chilled drinks flavored with herbs. A servant quietly burns incense nearby, adding soft curls of sandalwood smoke to the floral air. You settle briefly onto a cushion beside the open archway. The marble beneath you remains pleasantly cool. Some Persian gardens incorporate specially designed wind-catching towers called badgers, structures that channel moving air downward into shaded interiors. Combined with water evaporation, these systems can dramatically lower temperatures without any mechanical technology. Honestly, ancient Persian engineers would walk into certain modern subway stations, feel the trapped heat and stale air, and probably leave immediately in disappointment. A musician somewhere deeper in the garden begins playing a ney flute. The sound rises low and breathy through the darkness, blending almost perfectly with the scent of jasmine and the distant splash of fountains. Persian poetry often connects gardens with emotional peace, romance, mortality, and spiritual longing. Gardens become metaphors for paradise, wisdom, and the fleeting beauty of life itself. Poets describe roses blooming briefly before fading, nightingales singing to flowers, water carrying away sorrow. And tonight, inside this carefully designed stillness, you understand why. The garden slows the mind, not through silence alone, but through gentle sensory harmony. Nothing here demands urgency. Even time itself feels softer. You rise again and wander toward another section of the garden where orange trees grow beside narrow water channels. Their blossoms release delicate citrus perfume into the cooling air. Moonlight glimmers on the leaves. One older nobleman reclines nearby with closed eyes while a servant lightly fans him. Judging by the peaceful expression on his face, he may have invented retirement centuries ahead of schedule. Farther down the pathway, children chase fireflies between flower beds while exhausted parents pretend not to notice. Somewhere a ceramic cup falls over, followed by a very quiet apology. The garden remains alive, but gently alive. Never chaotic, never harsh. As the moon climbs higher, more flowers open fully into the night air. Their fragrances mingle together above the flowing water and cool stone. And beneath the shelter of trees and stars, surrounded by blossoms designed to bloom strongest after dark, you begin to feel your own thoughts opening and softening too. Fun 4. The scent of orange blossoms lingers behind you as the pathways curve toward the quieter edge of the garden. Here, the lanterns are spaced farther apart, their golden light barely touching the stone. Above the walls, the desert night stretches vast and clear, but inside the garden, the air feels entirely different. Cooler, softer, almost impossibly gentle. You notice it most when the breeze shifts. A ribbon of cool air slips through the corridor ahead and brushes against your face so suddenly that you stop walking for a moment. Outside these walls, the day's heat still clings stubbornly to the earth. Yet here, beneath vaulted arches and dense trees, the temperature has changed completely. The Persians do not simply endure the climate, they negotiate with it. And honestly, after spending 5 minutes under this cool breeze, you begin questioning every poorly ventilated building ever constructed by humanity. You continue forward beneath a long colonnade lined with carved stone pillars. Shadows gather in soft layers across mosaic floors. Above you, wooden lattice screens break the moonlight into delicate geometric patterns. Persian architects master the art of controlled shade. Trees are planted not randomly, but strategically. Tall cypresses block harsh western sunlight. Broad plane trees create deep afternoon shelter. Vine-covered trellises cool walkways naturally. Walls direct airflow. Open pavilions invite cross breezes through shaded chambers. Everything works together. Even silence feels engineered here. Ahead, an open pavilion rises beside a reflecting pool. Its roof rests on slender columns while all 4 sides remain exposed to the night air. Several guests recline on cushions inside, sipping chilled drinks infused with mint and cucumber. A servant quietly places damp cloths scented with rosewater into ceramic bowls nearby. Tiny droplets gather on the surface of the cups from the coolness. You would absolutely cry with gratitude if someone handed you one of those after walking across a Persian summer courtyard at noon. The breeze strengthens again. This time, you notice where it comes from. Beyond the pavilion stands a tall rectangular tower rising above the garden walls. Narrow openings near its top capture moving air high above the ground and funnel it downward through internal shafts. These wind catchers, badgers, are among the most brilliant climate inventions of the ancient world. Hot air rises, cool air sinks. The Persians use this principle masterfully. Some systems direct air over underground water channels before releasing it into rooms and courtyards. The result is remarkably effective natural cooling centuries before electric fans or air conditioning exist. Historians are still debating whether the earliest Badger systems originated primarily in elite Persian architecture or developed gradually from practical desert survival techniques among ordinary communities. Either way, someone here clearly became tired of sweating constantly and decided to outsmart the atmosphere itself. You step closer to the pavilion. Inside, the temperature drops noticeably. The marble floor beneath your sandals feels cool despite the lingering heat outside. Water channels run directly through the structure, carrying fresh moisture into the moving air. Curtains flutter gently near the arches. Nothing about the design feels accidental. Persian architecture often blurs the line between building and landscape. Gardens flow into pavilions. Pavilions open into courtyards. Courtyards connect to water channels. Shade and airflow become architectural materials just as important as stone or wood. You settle briefly beside one of the open arches. From here, you can hear multiple layers of sound at once. A fountain murmuring nearby, leaves rustling overhead, distant music drifting through the garden. Water moving beneath stone grates. The entire environment feels calibrated to reduce tension. One elderly architect seated across the pavilion quietly traces geometric patterns onto a wax tablet while speaking with a younger apprentice. Persian builders place immense importance on symmetry and proportion. Geometry is not merely decorative. Balanced space creates emotional harmony. Straight pathways calm the eye. Centered pools create stability. Repeating arches establish rhythm. Modern neuroscience would eventually discover that humans respond positively to ordered visual environments. The Persians simply figured it out first through observation and experience. And unlike modern waiting rooms with fluorescent lighting that somehow increase existential dread, these spaces genuinely soothe the nervous system. You continue onward into a shaded corridor thick with climbing vines. The walls here are built from pale stone that releases stored daytime heat slowly into the night. Above, narrow roof openings allow warm air to escape upward while cooler air circulates below. Everywhere you look, the architecture collaborates with nature instead of fighting it. This cooperation becomes especially important during Persian summers. In some regions, daytime temperatures grow punishingly intense, yet through wind towers, thick walls, underground chambers, gardens, pools, and shaded arcades, Persian cities create pockets of remarkable comfort. Comfort itself becomes an art form. A pair of servants carry ceramic jars filled with cool water across the courtyard ahead. Tiny beads of condensation shine along the clay's surface. One pauses briefly beneath a tree, clearly appreciating the shade as much as anyone else. You pass into another open garden chamber where fig trees spread broad leaves above woven carpets. Several scholars sit discussing philosophy beside a narrow fountain while sipping sherbet, chilled with mountain snow stored deep underground from winter months, which is honestly one of the most impressively committed luxury flexes in ancient history. Imagine hauling snow across mountains purely so your summer drinks feel slightly fancier. Yet beneath the extravagance lies practical wisdom too. Persian elite culture prizes calm conversation, reflection, poetry, and measured thought. Gardens and cooling spaces support this ideal. A relaxed mind thinks more clearly. The breeze shifts once more. Somewhere beyond the walls, desert sand moves softly across the dark landscape. But inside the garden, the air smells of mint, water, and flowering vines. You reach the far edge of the pavilion complex where a staircase descends into a partially underground chamber. The temperature drops instantly as you step downward. Thick earth walls surround the space while cool air gathers naturally below ground level. Several guests rest quietly here on cushions, escaping even the mild warmth of the evening. No one speaks loudly. No one rushes. The atmosphere itself seems to encourage slower breathing. You lean against the cool stone wall and listen to water echo softly through hidden channels beneath the floor. And as the night breeze continues gliding through arches, trees, and flowing water above, you begin realizing that these gardens were never simply built to impress visitors. They were built to help people feel human again beneath the weight of the desert sun. Fun 5. The underground chamber slowly empties as the night deepens. One by one, the scholars gather their scrolls, servants collect ceramic cups, and the last quiet conversations drift upward into the garden above. You remain seated against the cool stone wall for a few moments longer, listening to the soft echo of hidden water channels moving somewhere beneath your feet. The temperature down here feels almost unreal. Outside, beyond the thick garden walls, the desert still holds the memory of the day's heat. But underground, the air settles into calm stillness. Ancient Persian engineers understand thermal balance so well that entire sections of palaces and gardens function like naturally cooled sanctuaries. Honestly, if these architects suddenly appeared inside a modern apartment building with broken summer air conditioning, they would probably stage an intervention immediately. At last you rise and follow a narrow staircase back toward the surface. The scent of damp earth gradually gives way to roses and cypress once more. Above ground, the moon now hangs high over the garden, silver light washing softly across pathways and reflecting pools. Most noble guests have retired deeper into the palace by now, but the garden itself remains awake, because gardens like these do not maintain themselves. Ahead, beneath the pale glow of lanterns, you notice several workers moving quietly between flower beds. One trims vines beside a marble wall. Another clears fallen leaves from a narrow water channel. A third carefully checks the roots of young citrus trees using a bronze gardening knife. These are the royal gardeners, the silent caretakers of paradise. Persian empires depend heavily on agriculture and water management, and nowhere is that knowledge displayed more elegantly than inside these gardens. Every healthy rose, every shaded fig tree, every flowing fountain represents constant labor hidden beneath the appearance of effortless beauty, which, come to think of it, is also true of most fancy hotels. You walk slowly toward the nearest gardener, an older man kneeling beside a bed of lilies. His hands are stained with soil despite the late hour. Beside him rests a small basket filled with pruning tools, clay markers, and packets of seeds wrapped carefully in linen cloth. He works with slow confidence, nothing rushed, nothing wasted. Persian gardeners possess deep practical knowledge passed across generations. They understand irrigation timing, seasonal winds, soil quality, root depth, pruning methods, and which plants thrive together. In harsh climates, mistakes can destroy months or years of work. Water especially requires constant attention. One blocked channel can damage entire sections of the garden. Too much irrigation weakens roots. Too little dries delicate plants beneath the desert air. Historians are still debating how much botanical knowledge spread across Persian territories through royal gardens themselves, which may have functioned as living centers for agricultural experimentation and plant exchange. Standing here tonight, surrounded by species gathered from distant regions, that idea feels very believable. The older gardener notices you observing the lilies. He gently lifts one flower toward the moonlight. Its pale petals glow almost translucent in the darkness. Persian gardens often combine native plants with imported species collected through trade and imperial expansion. The Persian world stretches across enormous territories at various points in history, linking regions from Central Asia to Mesopotamia and beyond. Along these routes travel seeds, fruits, flowers, irrigation ideas, and cultivation techniques. Gardens become maps of empire. Quiet botanical trophies arranged in geometric harmony. You continue walking beside the gardeners as they move methodically through the night. One young apprentice spreads fresh mulch around pomegranate trees. Another carefully cleans mineral buildup from a fountain outlet using a thin copper rod. Even the fountains need maintenance almost daily. Minerals from flowing water gradually accumulate inside stone channels and pipes. Algae forms. Leaves clog drains. Tiny cracks appear in plaster basins. Paradise is surprisingly high maintenance. You pass beneath a row of towering plane trees whose branches stretch wide across the pathways. Their shade becomes essential during brutal summer afternoons. Persian gardeners deliberately combine tall canopy trees with lower flowering shrubs to create layered cooling effects throughout the grounds. The deeper you walk into the garden, the more obvious the planning becomes. Nothing is random. The placement of trees affects airflow. The depth of pools affects temperature. The spacing of walls shapes shade movement across the day. Even bird activity matters. Some gardens intentionally encourage songbirds through fruit trees and water sources because pleasant, natural sound contributes to the atmosphere of calm. Ancient environmental psychology quietly unfolding beneath moonlight. A gardener ahead opens a small stone hatch built into the pathway. Cool air rises immediately from below. You peer downward into darkness, where water flows steadily through an underground channel. This hidden infrastructure forms the true heart of the garden. Without it, the pools dry, the flowers wither, the shade weakens, the paradise disappears back into dust. Canal systems carry water across vast distances through gently sloping underground tunnels designed to minimize evaporation. Some stretch for astonishing lengths beneath deserts and rocky plains. Constructing them requires mathematical precision, engineering skill, and enormous labor, and maintenance never ends. Collapsed tunnels must be repaired constantly, sediment removed, shafts cleaned. You suddenly realize the Persian garden exists only because countless workers spend generations fighting against heat, gravity, and drought itself, which somehow makes the beauty here feel even more meaningful. Ahead, several gardeners gather briefly beneath a fig tree to drink cool water from clay cups. They speak quietly among themselves while moonlight filters through the leaves overhead. Their lives differ greatly from the nobles resting in shaded pavilions nearby. Yet both groups depend on the garden in different ways. The elites seek comfort, philosophy, prestige, and leisure. The gardeners provide the skill and labor, transforming impossible land into living refuge. A warm breeze drifts over the walls from the surrounding desert. The contrast is immediate. Dry heat presses against the garden edges, while inside the air remains cooler and fragrant. One gardener smiles faintly as he notices you react to the temperature difference. He has likely watched this small moment happen hundreds of times before. Because every visitor entering these gardens experiences the same quiet realization. Human beings can shape environments not only for survival, but for peace. The workers gradually return to their tasks. Water continues flowing through hidden channels beneath the pathways. Leaves rustle softly overhead, and beneath the moonlit branches of carefully tended trees, you walk onward through a paradise sustained not by magic, but by patient hands working gently through the night. Haberfund 6, the gardeners fade quietly behind you, their lanterns glowing dimly beneath the trees like wandering fireflies. Ahead, the pathways widen again into one of the grand central sections of the garden, where moonlight spills across long reflecting pools and marble walkways arranged with astonishing precision. Even half asleep beneath the soft night air, your mind notices it immediately. Everything feels balanced, not stiff, not unnatural, just deeply, strangely calm. The Persians understand something subtle about human perception long before modern psychology gives it scientific vocabulary. Symmetry relaxes the brain. Straight lines settle the eye. Repeating shapes create predictability. Balanced proportions reduce mental strain. And honestly, after spending time in certain modern buildings designed like abstract puzzles created during emotional breakdowns, this level of visual harmony feels medically restorative. You walk slowly along the central axis of the garden. A narrow water channel runs perfectly through the middle, dividing the pathways into mirrored halves. Cypress trees rise evenly on both sides like silent attendants guarding the stillness. The famous Persian Chahar Bagh design reaches its full expression here. 4 quadrants, 4 flowing channels, a central focal point, order emerging from geometry. The design carries symbolic meaning as well. In Persian and later Islamic traditions, the 4-part garden often reflects descriptions of paradise divided by rivers of life. Water, greenery, fruit, shade, fragrance, and symmetry all combine into a vision of divine harmony brought down into earthly form. Historians are still debating whether the earliest 4-part Persian gardens were originally tied more closely to Zoroastrian cosmology or evolved later through broader spiritual symbolism across Persian empires. Either way, the emotional effect is undeniable. You feel calmer simply walking through it. Ahead, a long rectangular pool reflects the moon with near-perfect clarity. The water barely moves. The surrounding arches duplicate themselves on the surface so precisely that for a moment the entire garden appears suspended upside down beneath your feet. Persian designers adore reflection. Pools expand space visually. They double beauty. They bring sky and architecture together. They soften hard stone with shifting light. And perhaps most importantly for warm climates, they psychologically cool a space even before the body fully notices the temperature change. One architect seated beneath an archway studies the reflections quietly while sketching geometric patterns onto parchment. Beside him rests a compass, ruler, and small ceramic lamp. Geometry in Persian architecture is never merely decorative excess. It expresses philosophical ideas. Balanced design reflects balanced existence. Mathematics becomes beauty. Beauty becomes tranquility. You pause beside a tiled wall covered in intricate repeating star patterns. The deeper you stare, the more the shapes seem to unfold endlessly across the surface. Persian artisans master complex geometric decoration partly because repeating forms suggest infinity, order continuing beyond immediate human limits. Unlike giant statues shouting political power at everyone passing by, these patterns whisper instead. Quiet confidence, quiet intelligence, quiet control. A cool breeze drifts across the pool and briefly disturbs the reflections. Tiny ripples shimmer outward beneath the moonlight. Farther along the pathway, several servants kneel adjusting cushions inside an open pavilion. The structure itself follows careful proportional systems. Arches align symmetrically. Columns balance one another perfectly. Openings frame specific garden views intentionally. Nothing accidental survives in royal Persian design. Even your walking pace changes here. The pathways encourage slowness. Straight axes draw the eye forward calmly. Repeated trees establish rhythm. Balanced spaces reduce distraction. You begin moving almost meditatively without realizing it. Modern casinos spend enormous money designing confusing layouts that keep people disoriented and emotionally stimulated. Persian gardens accomplish the opposite. They gently guide the nervous system toward peace. You pass beneath another arcade where moonlight filters through carved stone screens. Tiny openings scatter pale geometric shadows across the floor like lace woven from silver. The architects deliberately manipulate light as part of the experience. Bright courtyards open into shaded corridors. Narrow passages suddenly reveal wide pools. Dark archways frame glowing gardens beyond. The sequence matters as much as the individual spaces themselves. Persian landscape design unfolds gradually, almost cinematically. One young apprentice ahead measures the distance between newly planted shrubs using knotted cords, while an older supervisor watches nearby. Even plant spacing follows strict aesthetic logic. Uneven growth is trimmed carefully to preserve visual harmony. You cannot help admiring the dedication. Although part of you suspects at least one exhausted apprentice throughout history quietly muttered, "No one will notice if this bush is slightly crooked." A low fountain hums nearby. You follow the sound toward a circular courtyard centered around a marble basin shaped like an eight-pointed star. Water spills softly from each point into smaller channels radiating outward through the garden. The symbolism of paradise appears again and again, flowing outward, balanced, abundant, alive. Persian rulers often use gardens like these to communicate power not through intimidation alone, but through mastery over environment and order. Creating paradise in harsh climates demonstrates wealth, engineering skill, political stability, and cosmic legitimacy all at once. The message becomes clear. If a ruler can make the desert bloom, perhaps the universe itself favors his reign. Of course, maintaining that illusion requires enormous labor hidden behind the scenes, something you remember from the gardeners working quietly through the night. The farther you wander, the quieter the garden grows. Most lanterns burn lower now. Many guests have retired indoors. Only the soft sound of water and occasional rustling leaves remain. You sit beside the reflecting pool. The marble still holds faint warmth from the day. Above you, stars shine steadily through gaps between cypress branches. Below you, those same stars shimmer in the water. Perfect symmetry again. Heaven mirrored on earth. For a long moment, everything feels balanced so completely that even your thoughts begin settling into stillness. And somewhere deep inside this carefully ordered paradise, your restless modern mind slowly remembers what calm is supposed to feel like. Fun 7. The marble beside the reflecting pool has cooled completely now, releasing the last traces of daytime warmth into the night air. You remain seated for a while beneath the cypress trees, watching moonlight ripple gently across the water. The garden has grown quieter with every passing hour. Yet somewhere ahead, Beyond rows of darkened pavilions and sleeping flower beds, soft laughter drifts through the trees. And then another scent reaches you. Ripe fruit, sweet figs, fresh melon, pomegranate, grapes still cool from shaded storage rooms. You rise slowly and follow the fragrance deeper into the garden. Persian gardens are designed not only to calm the eye and cool the body, but also to nourish. Fruit trees form an essential part of these landscapes. Their branches provide shade, beauty, fragrance, and food all at once. Practical luxury woven naturally into paradise itself. Honestly, modern decorative landscaping sometimes feels deeply confused by comparison. Ancient Persians looked at a garden and apparently thought, yes, but what if the scenery also handed you snacks? Ahead, lanterns glow softly beneath a grove of pomegranate trees. Their twisted branches cast intricate shadows across woven carpets spread over the stone pathways. Several guests remain awake here, reclining on cushions while servants arrange silver trays filled with sliced pears, pistachios, dates, and figs. The atmosphere feels slower now, sleepier, the conversation softer. A musician lazily plucks strings nearby, while cool water flows through narrow channels circling the grove. You settle beneath a fig tree whose broad leaves rustle gently overhead. A servant offers you chilled slices of melon sprinkled lightly with crushed mint. The fruit tastes impossibly refreshing after the lingering desert heat. Persian cuisine and garden culture intertwine closely. Many royal gardens include orchards producing pomegranates, quinces, apricots, grapes, mulberries, almonds, and citrus fruits. These spaces are not purely ornamental. They are living ecosystems supporting pleasure and sustenance simultaneously. The Persians deeply appreciate sensory harmony. Shade cools the body, water calms the mind, fragrance softens emotion, fruit refreshes the spirit. Even tonight, long after sunset, the orchard continues serving its purpose. One elderly poet seated nearby slowly breaks open a pomegranate. Ruby seeds catch the lantern light like tiny gemstones. In Persian symbolism, pomegranates often represent fertility, abundance, eternal life, and beauty. Their imagery appears repeatedly in poetry, textiles, architecture, and mythology. You watch several seeds fall into a shallow bowl of water, where they drift like floating embers. Historians are still debating whether certain fruit trees became symbolic within Persian culture, primarily through religious traditions, or because generations simply associated them with survival, prosperity, and comfort in harsh climates. Considering how emotionally attached humans become to good food during difficult conditions, it was probably both. A breeze moves through the orchard. Figs sway gently overhead. Somewhere nearby, a nightingale begins singing from the branches of a cypress tree. Persian gardens often intentionally attract birds through fruit, shade, and water. Their songs become part of the designed atmosphere. Nightingales especially hold powerful poetic significance in Persian literature, often symbolizing longing, beauty, devotion, or the soul itself. The sound drifts softly across the water channels. No loud performances, no dramatic interruptions, just quiet music layered naturally into the night. You glance upward through the fig leaves toward the stars above. The branches frame the sky in shifting patterns, while lantern light flickers softly below. The entire orchard feels suspended between earth and heaven. A servant nearby gently fans flies away from a bowl of grapes using woven reeds. Another pours cooled rosewater into shallow ceramic cups. Honestly, the level of commitment to comfort here is extraordinary. Even the fruit is arranged aesthetically. You lean back against a cushion while the orchard breathes around you. Warm stone beneath the carpets still radiates faint heat upward, but the surrounding trees keep the air pleasantly cool. Persian orchard design reflects careful agricultural knowledge as much as artistic vision. Trees are spaced strategically to maximize airflow, shade, and irrigation efficiency. Different species provide harvests at different times of year, ensuring long seasonal abundance. Nothing grows carelessly. Every branch belongs to a larger rhythm. One young gardener quietly checks the roots of a newly planted quince tree near the edge of the grove. Even now, well past midnight, maintenance continues. You remember the workers from earlier, the hidden caretakers preserving paradise tree by tree, channel by channel. Without them, these orchards would disappear quickly beneath drought and heat. A low table nearby holds bowls of almonds, walnuts, and dried apricots beside chilled drinks flavored with basil seeds and cucumber. Several guests speak quietly about poetry while absent-mindedly peeling pistachios. The entire scene feels profoundly unhurried. Nobody checks the time, nobody seems eager to leave. And perhaps that is one of the garden's greatest achievements. It dissolves urgency. Persian elite culture often values leisurely intellectual and social gatherings within garden spaces. Long conversations unfold beneath trees late into the night. Poetry readings accompany shared fruit and music. Reflection itself becomes a kind of luxury. Modern productivity culture would probably burst into flames after 5 minutes here. The nightingale sings again. A breeze scatters fig leaves across the pathway. Farther down the orchard, lantern reflections tremble in the irrigation channels running silently beneath the trees. You notice how the fruit itself changes the atmosphere emotionally. Unlike purely ornamental spaces, orchards feel generous, alive, welcoming. Their abundance softens the environment psychologically. Even in darkness, heavy branches suggest nourishment waiting patiently overhead. A child half asleep on a pile of cushions clutches a fig in one hand, while his exhausted mother gently removes sticky pomegranate juice from his face with a cloth. Some things truly survive every civilization. You close your eyes briefly. The orchard smells of ripe fruit, damp soil, rosewater, and cooling stone. Water murmurs nearby. The leaves whisper softly overhead. And beneath the shelter of ancient trees planted carefully for both comfort and beauty, you begin to understand why Persian gardens never separate pleasure from peace. Fun 8. The orchard slowly quiets behind you as the last conversations soften into murmurs beneath the fig trees. A few lanterns still glow among the branches, but most of the noble guests have finally drifted indoors. The nightingale falls silent. Water continues flowing through the narrow channels beside the pathways with steady calm, as if the garden itself never truly sleeps. You follow one of the channels away from the orchard. At first it seems simple enough, just another ribbon of water moving silently beneath moonlight. But gradually you notice something strange. The land around you slopes gently upward, and yet the water continues flowing smoothly forward. No pumps, no wheels, no visible machinery, just gravity and impossible patience. The Persians solve one of the harshest challenges of desert life with astonishing ingenuity. They move water underground across enormous distances through hidden tunnels called qanats. And honestly, once you understand how these systems work, you begin suspecting ancient Persian engineers were quietly showing off a little. The pathway narrows between stone walls covered in climbing vines. Ahead, a small maintenance courtyard opens beside a low structure built partly into the earth. Several workers stand nearby, holding oil lamps, while cool air drifts upward from a dark opening in the ground. You approach carefully. Below lies one of the qanat access shafts. The air rising from it feels wonderfully cold against your face. Qanats function through gently sloping underground tunnels connecting mountain aquifers to dry settlements far away. By transporting water beneath the earth instead of across exposed surfaces, evaporation remains minimal even under brutal desert heat. Some qanat systems stretch for dozens of kilometers. Constructing them requires remarkable surveying skill and mathematical precision. If the slope is too steep, erosion destroys the tunnel. Too shallow, and the water stagnates. Workers dig vertical shafts at intervals both for ventilation and maintenance access. The amount of labor involved is almost difficult to comprehend, especially when you realize all of this exists so people can eventually sit beside cool fountains eating grapes in peace. One older engineer kneels near the shaft entrance studying a clay map scratched with measurement lines. Beside him, younger workers lower buckets into the darkness below. The garden above may feel effortless, but beneath it lies an entire hidden world. Historians are still debating exactly how early qanat technology first spread across ancient Persia and neighboring regions, though many agree it became one of the most influential water management systems in human history. Standing here tonight, you can understand why entire civilizations depend on it. Without qanats, many Persian cities could not survive. You descend carefully down a narrow staircase carved beside the maintenance shaft. The air grows cooler with every step. Moisture clings faintly to the stone walls. Above you, moonlight shrinks into a pale circle. At the bottom, the tunnel opens beside a narrow stream of flowing water moving silently through darkness. The sound is hypnotic, soft, constant, ancient. Oil lamps cast trembling reflections along the underground channel while workers inspect the tunnel walls for cracks and sediment buildup. Maintenance never stops. Sand collapses sections. Mineral deposits form gradually. Roots intrude from above. Entire teams dedicate their lives to preserving these hidden arteries beneath the desert. You kneel beside the stream. The water feels icy cold against your fingertips. Somehow that sensation feels even more miraculous underground. Persian engineers understand terrain with astonishing sophistication. Qanat builders carefully study mountain elevations, groundwater sources, soil conditions, and long-distance gradients before beginning excavation. Mistakes could cost enormous amounts of labor and human life, and yet many Qanats survive functioning for centuries. Possibly the most patient plumbing system humanity has ever created. A young worker nearby carefully scrapes mineral deposits from the tunnel wall using a bronze tool, while another checks airflow through the shaft above. Their movements are calm and practiced despite the confined darkness. You notice how quiet everyone remains down here. Voices naturally soften underground. Even footsteps feel muted. The tunnel almost invites stillness. Above ground, the Persian garden symbolizes paradise. Below ground lies the hidden labor making paradise possible. You continue walking carefully along the maintenance ledge beside the water. Occasionally, small openings overhead reveal faint moonlight filtering down through ventilation shafts like pale stars trapped underground. The coolness here is extraordinary. In some Persian cities, underground water systems also help regulate temperatures above ground by cooling adjacent structures and garden spaces naturally. Once again, Persian architecture works with nature instead of against it. Modern cities sometimes seem designed by people actively fighting the concept of comfort. Farther along the tunnel, you reach a small underground chamber where water flow splits into several narrow channels feeding different sections of the gardens above. Clay markers identify irrigation routes for orchards, flower beds, fountains, and storage cisterns. Everything is measured carefully, controlled carefully, shared carefully. In arid environments, water management becomes both engineering and politics. Access to reliable water determines wealth, agriculture, urban growth, and political stability. Royal gardens display not only luxury but control over life itself. A ruler capable of sustaining flowing water in desert heat demonstrates enormous power. You pause beside one of the branching channels while droplets echo softly through the darkness overhead. For a moment, the tunnel feels almost sacred, not because of ceremony, but because of survival. A worker offers you a clay cup filled directly from the cold channel water. It tastes astonishingly fresh, cleaner and cooler than many modern office water dispensers, frankly, which feels mildly embarrassing for contemporary civilization. You eventually climb back toward the surface through another access stairway farther inside the garden grounds. As you emerge, warm night air brushes your face once more. Moonlight spills across the pathways above. The fountains continue flowing peacefully. The reflecting pools shimmer softly beneath the stars. Guests reclining in distant pavilions probably never think much about the underground tunnels beneath their feet. But now you know. Beneath every fragrant flower, every cool breeze, every shaded orchard, hidden rivers move patiently through the earth, carrying life upward into the quiet paradise of the Persian night. For 9. The warmth of the surface air feels almost strange after the underground coolness of the Qanat tunnels. You pause beside a cypress tree and let your eyes adjust again to the moonlit garden. Water continues flowing quietly through marble channels nearby, now carrying with it the secret knowledge of everything hidden beneath the earth. The garden above suddenly feels even more impressive. Not magical, earned. Every fountain now seems connected to unseen labor and astonishing engineering beneath the desert floor. Ahead, a warm amber glow flickers softly between the trees. Music drifts through the night air. Low strings, quiet voices, occasional laughter softened by distance. You follow the sound. The pathways gradually widen toward one of the larger garden pavilions, where lanterns hang from carved arches like floating stars. Silk curtains move gently in the breeze. Servants place cushions across raised platforms beside shallow pools reflecting the moon overhead. Tonight, poetry fills the garden. And honestly, If there is a more elegant way to spend an evening than reclining beside fountains while listening to poetry under fruit trees, humanity may have peaked too early. You step inside the pavilion. The atmosphere immediately changes, not louder, just richer. The scent of sandalwood incense mingles with rosewater and cooling stone. Musicians sit cross-legged near the edge of the platform, playing softly on santurs and nays. Nearby, scholars, nobles, and poets recline against embroidered cushions, while attendants refill cups of herbal sherbet. No one rushes the evening forward. Persian literary culture deeply intertwines with gardens. Poetry is not treated as an occasional entertainment here. It shapes conversation, philosophy, romance, spirituality, and social identity itself. Gardens become natural settings for reflection and recitation because both are associated with harmony, beauty, and inner balance. One elderly poet rises slowly near the center of the pavilion. The conversations fade at once. Even the musicians soften their playing. The old man begins reciting verses in a calm, measured voice while moonlight glimmers across the water beside him. Though you do not understand every word, the rhythm alone feels soothing. Long flowing phrases rising and falling like the fountains surrounding the pavilion. Persian poetry often compares gardens to paradise, beloved faces to flowers, flowing water to passing time, and moonlight to divine beauty. The natural world becomes emotional language. Roses symbolize love. Cypresses symbolize dignity. Nightingales symbolize longing. Wine symbolizes transcendence. Honestly, modern text messaging feels deeply underprepared by comparison. A breeze moves through the open arches, carrying cool air across the pavilion floor. Lamps flicker gently. Somewhere beyond the walls, desert wind brushes across distant stone and sand. But inside the garden, everything remains calm. The old poet continues reciting. His voice blends almost perfectly with the water. Historians are still debating how much formal Persian garden design directly influenced the structure and imagery of classical Persian poetry, though the connection between literary and landscape traditions becomes impossible to ignore. Both seek balance, both seek harmony, both create emotional refuge. You settle beside one of the reflecting pools while attendants quietly pass trays of pistachios, dried apricots, and fresh pears among the guests. The water beside you mirrors the lantern so clearly that the light seems suspended beneath the surface like buried stars. A younger poet begins speaking next. His verses describe moonlight resting on cypress branches while lovers walk through gardens after the heat of day has faded. Several listeners nod softly in appreciation. Persian social gatherings often center around sophisticated verbal artistry. Memory, wit, poetic knowledge, and graceful speech become deeply admired qualities within educated circles. One scholar nearby casually quotes several lines from memory before gently correcting another guest's interpretation. Some forms of academic behavior truly survive every century. The musicians shift into a slower melody. The ney flute rises soft and breathy through the night air, sounding almost like wind moving through distant reeds. Combined with the fountains, the music creates a strangely hypnotic atmosphere. You notice how carefully the pavilion itself shapes sound. The curved ceilings soften echoes. Water masks harsh noise. Open arches prevent voices from becoming trapped or overwhelming. Even acoustics are part of the relaxation design. Persian architecture consistently treats comfort as something multidimensional, not merely physical, mental too, emotional too. A servant nearby refreshes incense burners with small pieces of oud wood. Sweet smoke curls upward through the lantern light. The fragrance deepens the sense of stillness around the gathering. Outside the pavilion, jasmine vines climb along the walls, while moonlight pools quietly across the pathways. Several guests wander slowly through the gardens between poetry recitations, speaking in low voices beneath the trees. Nothing here feels accidental. Not the water, not the music, not the pacing of the evening itself. You realize the garden functions almost like a giant instrument designed to gently tune human emotions toward calm. A poet seated near the edge of the pavilion now recites verses about mortality, how flowers bloom briefly before fading, how water flows endlessly onward, how beauty exists precisely because it cannot last forever. Yet the mood does not become sad, only softer, more thoughtful. Persian gardens often embody this balance between pleasure and impermanence. Blossoms wilt, seasons shift, water moves constantly, Moonlight changes nightly. The paradise remains beautiful, partly because it is temporary and alive. A night breeze passes through the arches once more. The lantern flames bend gently. Some guests begin reclining fully against cushions, eyes half closed as the poetry continues drifting through the warm darkness. The fountains murmur steadily nearby. The musicians play slower now, and beneath the scent of incense, flowers, and cool water, your thoughts begin dissolving into the quiet rhythm of the Persian night itself. Fun 10. The poetry pavilion gradually softens into near silence behind you. A few musicians still play quietly for the remaining guests, but the verses have slowed, stretched out by the late hour and the heavy calm of the garden. Lantern flames burn lower now, glowing amber beneath drifting curtains, while servants move almost invisibly through the shadows, collecting empty cups and folded blankets. You wander back into the open pathways. The night air feels cooler than before, not cold, just deeply comfortable. Above you, the stars spread clearly across the dark Persian sky, while below, water channels reflect thin silver ribbons of moonlight through the gardens. The entire world seems to breathe more slowly now, and then you hear it. Birdsong. Soft at first, a few delicate notes drifting from somewhere high in the trees. The Persians intentionally designed gardens to attract sound as much as beauty. Birds, fountains, rustling leaves, wind moving through branches, all become part of the emotional architecture. Centuries before anyone invents terms like sound therapy or biophilic design, Persian gardeners are already quietly building environments that calm the nervous system through nature itself. Honestly, modern relaxation apps charging monthly subscriptions would be devastated by the competition. You follow the sound toward a quieter grove near the outer edge of the garden walls. Tall cypress trees stand beside flowering shrubs, while narrow irrigation channels weave between patches of mint and basil. The breeze carries layers of scent and sound together so gently that it becomes difficult to separate them. Leaves rustle overhead. Water murmurs nearby. Crickets hum beneath the hedges. And somewhere hidden in the branches, a nightingale sings again. Persian literature celebrates nightingales constantly, often pairing them symbolically with roses. The bird becomes associated with longing, beauty, devotion, and emotional sensitivity. Gardens intentionally encourage their presence through shade, water, and fruit-bearing plants. The result is not simply decorative. It is psychological. Natural sound softens mental tension in ways humans instinctively respond to. You sit beside a low marble basin beneath a fig tree and close your eyes for a moment. Immediately the garden feels larger through sound alone. The fountains create distance. The leaves establish movement. The birds add life. Nothing feels empty. Nothing feels overwhelming. Perfect balance. A cool wind passes through the grove, and the cypress branches answer with soft whispering sounds. Persian architects and gardeners carefully study how airflow moves through trees and corridors. Different plants create different acoustic textures. Broad leaves rustle heavily. Cypress needles produce softer murmurs. Even wind becomes part of the composition. Historians are still debating whether certain Persian royal gardens intentionally incorporated specific bird species and acoustic planning as formal elements of elite landscape design, or whether these effects developed more organically through centuries of cultivation. Standing here tonight, listening to the layers blend together so precisely, intentional design feels very likely. Ahead, an elderly gardener slowly scatters grain near a shaded corner of the grove. Several small birds flutter down cautiously from the branches above. He notices you watching and smiles faintly. Birds are welcome guests here. In many Persian gardens, animal life contributes to the atmosphere of abundance and harmony. Fish glide through pools. Birds nest in fruit trees. Insects hum among flowers. The paradise feels alive because it supports life naturally. You glance toward one of the reflecting pools nearby, where moonlight trembles gently across the surface. Tiny ripples move outward as fish disturb the water below. Even that sound matters. Soft movement, soft rhythm, soft interruption. Nothing sharp, nothing sudden. Honestly, after spending enough time here, modern notification sounds would probably feel like emotional violence. A pair of servants passes quietly, carrying rolled carpets and extinguished lanterns back toward the palace. Most guests have long since retired indoors, yet the garden itself remains awake beneath the moonlight. Persian gardens are designed for multiple emotional states throughout the day: morning freshness, afternoon refuge, evening sociability, nighttime contemplation. And right now, in the deepest part of the night, the garden belongs to silence and sound equally. You continue wandering through the grove while dry desert wind brushes faintly against the outer walls beyond the trees. The contrast fascinates you. Just beyond the enclosure lies a harsh landscape shaped by heat and scarcity. Yet inside the walls, controlled water and carefully chosen plants create softness everywhere. The garden acts almost like a protective dream. One scholar seated alone beneath a cypress tree quietly listens to the night sounds while writing notes by lamplight, perhaps poetry, perhaps philosophy, perhaps simply avoiding sleep after too much late-night sherbet. The Persians often associate gardens with intellectual clarity. Natural sound reduces distraction while water and shade calm the body. Scholars, astronomers, physicians, and poets all use gardens as places for focused thought and emotional restoration. Modern research would eventually confirm that exposure to natural environments improves concentration, lowers stress, and enhances mood. The Persians simply trusted experience. A stronger breeze moves through the grove. This time the leaves above respond in layers. The broad fig leaves clap softly. The cypress branches hiss gently. The flowering vines tremble against the stone walls. The entire garden answers the wind like an orchestra, warming quietly in the dark. You realize the genius of Persian garden design lies not only in what visitors see, but in what they hear without consciously noticing. The absence of harshness, the presence of rhythm, the careful blending of living sounds, water covering distant noise, bird song softening silence, leaves turning wind into whispers. You lean back beside the basin while stars shimmer overhead through gaps in the branches. The nightingale sings once more somewhere far away. The fountains continue their endless silver conversation through the sleeping garden. And beneath the calm architecture of sound and moonlight, your thoughts finally begin growing as quiet as the Persian night itself. 5:11. The nightingale's final notes fade slowly into the darkness, leaving only the gentle pulse of fountains and wind moving through the trees. You remain beside the marble basin for a little while longer, watching moonlight drift across the surface of the water like liquid silver. Most of the garden now sleeps. Lanterns burn low in distant corridors. Curtains barely stir inside the pavilions. Even the servants move more quietly than before, as though unwilling to disturb the carefully arranged peace settling over the grounds. But one part of the garden still glows softly ahead, a quieter enclosure near the far side of the complex, hidden behind rows of cypress and plane trees. You rise and follow the pathway toward it. The air changes almost immediately. Cooler here, still, thoughtful. The pathways narrow between tall hedges before opening into a secluded scholarly garden centered around a long reflecting pool. Stone benches line the edges beneath shaded archways. Shelves of scrolls rest inside open alcoves protected from moisture by carved wooden screens. This is not a garden built for celebration. It is built for concentration. And honestly, after wandering through so much beauty tonight, you begin suspecting ancient Persian intellectuals accidentally invented the perfect study environment centuries before coffee shops discovered background jazz playlists. Several scholars remain awake beneath the arches despite the late hour. One studies astronomical charts beside an oil lamp. Another slowly copies poetry onto fresh parchment while absent-mindedly eating pistachios. A physician nearby sorts dried herbs into small ceramic bowls. No one speaks loudly. The atmosphere itself discourages it. Persian scholarly culture flourishes across centuries through centers of philosophy, astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and literature. Gardens often serve as ideal settings for intellectual work because they provide calm temperatures, fresh air, controlled sound, and emotional balance. The Persians understand that clear thought depends partly on environment. A restless space creates restless thinking. You walk slowly beside the reflecting pool. Water flows gently beneath carved stone channels, feeding small fountains at regular intervals. Their soft, rhythmic sounds create enough movement to prevent silence from becoming oppressive, while never distracting from thought itself. Carefully calibrated tranquility. One elderly astronomer adjusts a bronze astrolabe beneath the moonlight, while comparing measurements to handwritten tables. Persian astronomers make extraordinary contributions to observational science over centuries, refining calendars, star catalogs, and mathematical models. Historians are still debating how much earlier Persian astronomical traditions influenced later scientific developments across the Islamic Golden Age, and eventually Europe, through translated manuscripts and scholarly exchange. Looking around this garden tonight, surrounded by instruments, geometry, water, and stars, it feels impossible that these spaces would not shape human knowledge profoundly. You pause beside a low stone table where several scrolls lie open beneath weighted corners. Delicate diagrams of plants and irrigation systems cover the pages. Persian scholars study agriculture seriously because successful cultivation in arid climates requires deep technical understanding. The gardens themselves become living laboratories, botanical experimentation, hydraulic engineering, environmental design, all unfolding quietly beneath the moon. A cool breeze drifts through the arches, carrying the scent of mint and damp earth. Lamps flicker gently against tiled walls covered in geometric patterns. Again, symmetry appears everywhere. Even scholarly spaces follow balanced design principles intended to steady the mind. Straight sightlines reduce distraction. Open courtyards allow airflow. Water channels cool the surroundings naturally. Trees soften light and sound. Modern universities spend millions trying to create wellness-centered learning environments, while ancient Persian scholars are already calmly reading philosophy beside moonlit fountains. One young student nearby struggles sleepily to copy a manuscript while his teacher watches with patient disappointment. The student jerks awake each time his head dips too low over the parchment. Some educational traditions truly remain timeless. You continue toward the center pavilion, where several physicians quietly discuss medicinal herbs grown throughout the gardens. Persian medicine often integrates botanical knowledge extensively, using roses, mint, basil, saffron, pomegranate, and countless other plants for treatments and tonics. The garden nourishes both body and mind. A physician crushes dried lavender between his fingers while explaining its calming effects to a younger apprentice. Another sorts rose petals for distillation into fragrant oils and medicinal preparations. The scent drifting through the pavilion becomes deeply soothing, not overpowering, just warm and herbal beneath the night air. Outside the scholarly enclosure, the broader garden remains almost completely silent now. Only distant fountains and occasional leaves rustling against the walls remind you of the sleeping paradise beyond. The scholars themselves move slowly. No frantic energy, no anxious urgency. Intellectual work here unfolds at human pace. One philosopher seated near the reflecting pool quietly recites a passage about balance between earthly pleasure and spiritual contemplation. Persian intellectual traditions often resist separating beauty from wisdom entirely. Gardens, poetry, astronomy, philosophy, and relaxation all overlap naturally. Knowledge is not meant to feel sterile. It is meant to harmonize with life. You sit briefly beside the pool and gaze upward. The stars reflect clearly in the water below, while cypress silhouettes frame the sky overhead. Somewhere nearby, a reed pen scratches softly across parchment. Everything about the garden encourages attentiveness without tension, focus without exhaustion, calm without emptiness. A servant quietly refills an oil lamp beside the astronomer's table before retreating into the shadows once more. The moon has drifted westward now. Soon dawn will begin its slow approach across the desert beyond the walls. But for now, the scholarly garden remains suspended between sleep and thought, a peaceful sanctuary where water, trees, cool air, and quiet minds exist together in perfect balance beneath the Persian night. Fun 12. The scholarly garden slowly fades behind you as the night deepens toward its quietest hour. A few lamps still glow beneath the arches where astronomers and physicians continue their work, but most of the garden now rests in near total stillness. Even the fountains seem softer somehow. You walk alone along a narrow pathway lined with pale stone and dark cypress shadows. Above the walls, the stars burn cold and clear over the sleeping Persian landscape. Somewhere far beyond the gardens, desert wind moves gently across distant hills. Ahead, moonlight suddenly opens wide across water. You stop instinctively. Before you lies one of the largest reflecting pools in the garden complex, a long mirror of silver stretching between marble terraces and open pavilions. The surface remains almost perfectly still beneath the night sky. It does not simply reflect the moon, it seems to hold it. And honestly, after spending enough time here, you begin understanding why ancient people occasionally believed paradise might literally be hidden inside gardens like this. The Persians adore reflective water, not only for cooling or irrigation, but for emotional effect. Large, still pools expand space visually, soften architecture, and connect the heavens to the earth below. The moon becomes part of the garden. The stars descend into human reach. Water transforms the night itself into decoration. You walk slowly along the edge of the pool while marble glimmers faintly beneath your feet. Tall arches stand reflected upside down in the water with such clarity that the line between reality and reflection begins to blur. The symmetry feels dreamlike. Persian garden philosophy often centers around creating ordered beauty that echoes divine harmony. Reflection pools reinforce this idea beautifully. Heaven appears mirrored on earth. The celestial world and human world seem temporarily aligned. Historians are still debating whether the symbolic use of reflective water in Persian gardens originally carried stronger spiritual meaning or functioned primarily as elite aesthetic sophistication that gradually acquired religious symbolism over time. Standing here tonight, it honestly feels impossible to separate the two. A breeze passes lightly over the surface. Tiny ripples bend the moon into flowing silver patterns. Then the water settles once more. Nearby, a small pavilion rises over the pool on slender columns. Its open design allows cool air to move freely through the structure, while moonlight spills across embroidered cushions arranged near the edges. Several lanterns burn low inside, their reflections trembling gently below. You step inside. The marble floor feels cool beneath your feet. From here, the pool stretches outward like liquid sky. Persian architecture often frames views intentionally, and this pavilion clearly exists for contemplation of the water itself. Every arch directs attention toward reflection, symmetry, and stillness. Even the silence feels designed. One elderly caretaker quietly wipes condensation from a bronze lantern before bowing slightly and disappearing back into the shadows. No one else remains awake here now. The garden belongs to moonlight. You recline beside one of the arches and listen. Almost nothing, just distant water. Occasional leaves brushing softly together. A faint desert wind crossing the walls far away. The calm feels enormous. Modern life rarely allows this kind of silence anymore. True silence. Not empty silence filled secretly with electrical hums, traffic, notifications, refrigeration systems, or somebody inexplicably using a leaf blower at sunrise. Here, the quiet breathes naturally. Persian gardens intentionally create emotional separation from the outside world. Thick walls block dust, heat, and noise. Water masks distant sounds. Trees soften echoes. Reflection pools encourage stillness and inward thought. The result feels almost meditative. You gaze into the water again. Stars shimmer beneath the surface beside the reflected moon. Occasionally, tiny fish disturb the image with gentle ripples before disappearing back into darkness. Some Persian gardens include pools specifically positioned to maximize moonlight reflection during certain seasons or viewing angles. Light itself becomes part of the landscape design. The Persians shape atmosphere with extraordinary subtlety, not overwhelming grandeur, measured beauty, balanced sensory experience. You remember the underground qanats carrying hidden rivers beneath the desert, the gardeners trimming flowers by lantern light, the scholars studying stars beside fountains. Everything in the garden connects through water, symmetry, sound, fragrance, and calm. Nothing exists independently. Even this pool depends on countless unseen hands and carefully maintained systems beneath the earth. A cloud drifts slowly across the moon overhead. For a moment, the reflections dim. The garden darkens softly. Then silver light returns again across the surface. Persian poetry frequently uses moonlit gardens as settings for spiritual reflection, romance, philosophical contemplation, and emotional longing. The combination of water, night fragrance, soft light, and silence creates an atmosphere uniquely suited to introspection. You begin understanding why so many poets struggle to leave these places once they arrive. The pool makes time feel slower somehow. The stillness stretches thought outward gently. No urgency survives here, only breathing, watching, listening. Far across the water, the silhouette of a cypress tree stands perfectly reflected beneath the moon. Its dark shape points both upward and downward simultaneously, rooted in earth, mirrored in sky. The symbolism feels almost too perfect, yet nothing here seems forced. That is the genius of Persian garden design. Beauty appears effortless, even when built upon astonishing precision. You close your eyes briefly. Cool air drifts through the pavilion. Water breathes quietly below. Somewhere beyond the walls, the desert remains vast and dry beneath the stars. But here inside the garden, moonlight rests peacefully upon still water, and for a little while longer, the entire world feels calm enough to hold in your hands. Fun 13. The moonlit pool remains behind you like a fading dream as you continue through the sleeping garden. The night has reached that strange hour when even time itself seems drowsy. The air cools further. Lanterns burn lower. Somewhere in the distance, a final servant quietly closes carved wooden doors inside the palace. Most of the garden now belongs to shadows, water, and soft drifting fragrance. You walk beneath a long arcade covered in climbing jasmine. The blossoms release their strongest scent during the deepest part of the night, filling the cool air with sweetness almost delicate enough to taste. And then another fragrance joins it. Warm, earthy, smoky, incense. Ahead, faint amber light flickers through an open pavilion tucked beside a grove of cypress trees. Thin streams of perfumed smoke curl upward through the arches and disappear into the darkness above. You follow them quietly. Inside the pavilion, several attendants move slowly around shallow bronze burners placed beside cushions and low marble tables. Tiny pieces of fragrant wood and resin glow softly atop charcoal embers. Sandalwood, frankincense, rose petals, dried herbs. Persian evening rituals often involve fragrance not merely for luxury, but for emotional and physical relaxation. Scent shapes mood powerfully. Certain oils calm the nerves. Certain herbs ease breathing. Certain smokes freshen rooms and clothing while softening the atmosphere of enclosed spaces. Ancient aromatherapy quietly unfolding beneath moonlight. Honestly, after breathing this air for 5 minutes, modern candle companies suddenly feel wildly overconfident. You settle onto a cushion near one of the open arches while an attendant pours a few drops of rose oil into warm water beside the burner. The scent spreads gently through the pavilion almost immediately. Nothing sharp, nothing overpowering, just warmth drifting slowly into the night. The Persians possess sophisticated knowledge of perfume making and distillation techniques centuries before many other regions. Rosewater, herbal oils, scented balms, and incense become deeply woven into elite domestic life, medicine, hospitality, and spiritual practices. Gardens themselves support this world of fragrance directly. Roses for oils, jasmine for perfume, mint for cooling scents, cypress resin for incense, lavender for calm. Everything connects again. The architecture here supports rest as carefully as the fragrances do. Open arches allow airflow while thick stone columns retain coolness from the night air. Water channels pass beneath the pavilion floor, subtly lowering surrounding temperatures. Several guests recline quietly nearby, preparing for sleep. One elderly nobleman listens to soft instrumental music while an attendant massages scented oil into his hands. Another drinks warm herbal infusion from a ceramic cup while staring sleepily toward the moonlit garden outside. No one speaks loudly anymore. The night itself discourages conversation now. Historians are still debating how much Persian relaxation rituals influenced later courtly traditions across Islamic empires through trade, diplomacy, and shared artistic culture. Considering how universally humans enjoy pleasant smells and comfortable naps, the influence probably spread very enthusiastically. You lean back against embroidered cushions while cool air drifts through the pavilion carrying hints of jasmine and damp stone. Somewhere nearby, water trickles softly through a narrow channel hidden beneath carved floor grates. The sound almost blends with breathing. Persian sleep culture often emphasizes gradual transition into rest rather than abrupt retreat from activity. Evening gardens, poetry, music, fragrance, cooling architecture, and herbal preparations all help guide the body toward calm. The environment itself prepares people for sleep. Modern life tends to do the opposite. Bright screens, artificial noise, stress, late-night emails. The Persians instead surround themselves with darkness, fragrance, water, and soft sound until the nervous system quietly surrenders. One attendant carefully burns dried lavender and crushed herbs beside the entrance archway. The smoke curls upward in pale blue ribbons before dissolving into the cool night air. Nearby, another servant spreads lightweight cotton blankets across cushions for guests intending to rest outdoors beneath the open pavilion roof. Honestly, sleeping beside fountains under jasmine vines sounds dangerously close to winning at civilization. You rise slowly and wander toward a smaller side chamber, partially enclosed by carved lattice screens. Inside, shallow ceramic bowls hold rosewater mixed with floating flower petals. The scent feels cool and clean beneath the warm incense drifting from the main pavilion. Persian bathing and evening cleansing rituals often include perfumed water, oils, and herbs intended to refresh both body and mind after the heat and dust of daytime. The desert climate makes such rituals especially meaningful. Outside the pavilion, the garden has grown almost entirely silent now. Even the birds sleep. Only the fountains continue their endless silver murmur beneath the trees. You step back into the open air for a moment. Moonlight rests softly across the pathways and reflecting pools. Cypress shadows stretch long and dark across the marble. Somewhere in the distance, a final musician plays several slow notes on a ney flute before falling silent too. The night feels complete now, balanced, finished. The fragrances lingering in the air seem to soften thought itself. Your breathing slows naturally beside the cool flowing water. Even your footsteps grow quieter, as though the garden has gently taught your body how to move through stillness. Persian gardens were never designed merely to impress visitors during daylight hours. Their deepest magic belongs to the night, to the slow unwinding of tension, to cooling air after heat, to moonlight on water, to flowers opening after dark, to incense drifting upward while the world gradually falls asleep. And beneath the scented arches of the sleeping garden, surrounded by fountains and soft darkness, you begin feeling yourself drift peacefully toward that same quiet surrender too. Fun 14. The last notes of the ney flute dissolve gently into the darkness, leaving the garden wrapped in almost complete silence. You wander slowly away from the perfumed pavilion, while thin strands of incense still drift behind you like fading memories. The night has grown deep now, that quiet hour before dawn when even restless minds begin giving up their arguments. Above the garden walls, the stars remain sharp and steady across the Persian sky. But inside the enclosure, shadows soften everything. Marble pathways glow faintly beneath moonlight. Cypress trees stand motionless. The reflecting pools have become sheets of black glass holding entire galaxies beneath their surfaces. You walk alone now. The palace windows are dark. The poetry gatherings ended long ago. Even the scholars have finally rolled up their scrolls and surrendered to sleep. Only the garden remains awake, and honestly, after spending an entire night here, you begin understanding why ancient rulers treasured these places more than jewels. Jewels sparkle. Gardens breathe. A cool breeze drifts through the pathways carrying the scent of damp earth and fading jasmine blossoms. The flowers have released most of their fragrance already, leaving behind a softer sweetness lingering in the air. The garden itself feels tired now, not lifeless, resting. You pass beneath an arcade where lanterns burn so low that the flames barely move. One final servant quietly extinguishes them one by one with practiced calm. Each fading light leaves the shadows deeper and gentler than before. Darkness spreads carefully across the marble. Persian gardens transform completely at this hour. Earlier, they belonged to conversation, poetry, music, and flowing movement. Now they belong to stillness. The architecture itself seems calmer. The pathways wider. The fountains slower somehow, though you know the water has not changed at all. Perhaps it is your mind changing instead. Historians are still debating whether certain Persian royal gardens were intentionally designed to create different emotional experiences depending on the hour of day and seasonal light conditions. If so, the designers succeeded beautifully, because this hour feels unlike any other part of the night. You stop beside a long reflecting pool now, almost entirely dark, except for scattered stars shimmering faintly on the surface. Without lantern light, the water blends into the surrounding stone, until the reflections themselves seem to float freely in empty space. A fish disturbs the stillness below. Tiny ripples spread outward, then silence returns again. Somewhere beyond the walls, distant desert wind brushes softly across the landscape. You can almost feel the vast emptiness waiting outside the garden. Dry earth, scattered rock, endless open land beneath the stars. And that contrast matters. Persian gardens are powerful partly because they exist against hardship, water against drought, shade against heat, softness against stone, stillness against the harsh unpredictability of the outside world. Paradise becomes meaningful because the desert surrounds it. You continue walking through the sleeping pathways, while leaves rustle faintly overhead. The cypress trees cast long shadows across the marble like dark brushstrokes. Even the fountains seem quieter now, their sound no longer decorative, simply steady, like breathing. You notice how cool the air has become. The stored heat of the day has finally drained from the stone walls and pathways. Moisture gathers lightly along the edges of the water channels. Somewhere nearby, mint leaves release sharp freshness into the darkness. A small cat slips silently across the garden path ahead of you before disappearing beneath a hedge. Some ancient palace servant absolutely fed that creature's scraps for years despite pretending otherwise. You smile faintly and continue onward. At the far edge of the garden, a raised pavilion overlooks the sleeping grounds. You climb its shallow steps slowly and settle near the open archway facing east. From here, the entire garden stretches below you. The geometric pathways, the dark pools, the pale marble terraces, the rows of trees, everything balanced, everything resting. For the first time all night, no human voices remain. Only water, only leaves, only distant wind. Persian philosophy often values moderation, harmony, reflection, and emotional balance. Gardens embody those ideals physically. They slow the body, organize the senses, encourage contemplation rather than urgency. And now, in the deepest silence before dawn, the garden reveals its final purpose. Not entertainment, not status, not even beauty alone. Peace. Simple human peace. The kind modern people spend entire vacations desperately trying to rediscover while checking work messages beside hotel pools. You lean back against the cool stone column and gaze upward. The stars above the garden begin shifting slowly toward morning positions. The moon hangs lower now near the western horizon, pale and tired after its long watch over the fountains and trees. Soon the gardeners will wake again. Servants will relight lamps. Water channels will be inspected. Fruit gathered, flowers trimmed. The entire paradise carefully renewed for another day beneath the desert sun. But for now, everything remains suspended in perfect stillness. The garden sleeps. And beneath the fading stars and whispering cypress branches, you feel your own thoughts finally growing quiet enough to rest beside it. Fun 15. The eastern horizon begins changing so slowly you almost miss it at first. Not light, exactly. Just the faintest softening of darkness beyond the garden walls. The stars still hang above the Persian sky, but their sharpness has faded slightly now, as though the night itself is growing sleepy after keeping watch for so many hours. You remain seated beneath the open pavilion overlooking the silent gardens below. Everything is still. The fountains continue their gentle murmuring through the pathways. Cypress shadows rest across pale stone. Reflecting pools hold the last fragments of moonlight like fading dreams. And somewhere deep beneath the earth, the qanats continue carrying hidden rivers patiently through the sleeping desert. The garden never truly stops breathing. A cool dawn breeze drifts through the arches and brushes softly against your face. It carries traces of damp soil, fading jasmine, rosewater lingering from the evening rituals, and the clean mineral scent of flowing water. The air feels wonderfully fresh now, lighter. The oppressive memory of daytime heat has vanished completely. Honestly, if mornings always smelled like this, humanity might become dramatically less unpleasant before noon. Far below, movement finally begins returning to the garden. A single gardener appears beside the central pathways carrying a bronze lantern now barely necessary against the growing light. He walks slowly beside the irrigation channels, checking water flow exactly as countless gardeners have done here across generations. Soon another joins him, then another. Quiet figures emerging gently into the dawn. No rushing, no noise, just calm repetition. The paradise waking carefully. Historians are still debating whether the enduring influence of Persian gardens spread primarily through imperial expansion, trade routes, or the simple universal human desire for cool shaded beauty in difficult climates. But sitting here now, watching the first morning light touch the fountains, you suspect the answer may be simpler. People carried these ideas forward because they worked, not only practically, emotionally. Persian gardens make human beings feel calmer, safer, more balanced. The first birds begin stirring among the fig trees below. Soft chirping spreads gradually through the branches while pale gold light brushes the tops of the cypress rows. The transformation is subtle but magical. Night does not end abruptly here. It loosens its grip slowly. One reflecting pool catches the first true streak of sunrise and suddenly glows silver blue beneath the fading stars. The marble pathways brighten little by little. Flower petals become visible again after hours hidden in darkness. The garden reappears. You descend from the pavilion and wander once more through the quiet pathways while dawn unfolds around you. The fountains sound brighter somehow in the morning air. Tiny droplets shimmer on leaves and stone edges. A servant nearby scatters fresh rose petals across a shallow basin, while another relights incense inside one of the smaller pavilions. The cycle begins again. Water flowing, gardens tended, shade preserved, beauty renewed. You pass the orchard where figs and pomegranates hang heavy beneath pale early light. A few sleepy birds hop between the branches searching for breakfast, while gardeners inspect the roots beneath the trees. Farther ahead, the scholarly courtyard sits empty now, except for abandoned scroll weights and extinguished oil lamps. The astronomers have gone to rest after their long night beneath the stars. The pools still mirror the sky, only now they reflect dawn instead of moonlight. You walk slowly beside the central water channels one final time. Everything you experience through the night remains here, woven together quietly. The cool Qanat water beneath the earth, the geometry calming the eye, the fragrance drifting through moonlit pavilions, the poetry beside fountains, the wind towers gathering desert breezes, the nightingales hidden in the trees, the careful labor sustaining paradise against heat and drought. Nothing existed alone. Every part supported every other part, and perhaps that is the deepest wisdom hidden inside Persian gardens. Peace itself is designed, not purchased, not rushed, created patiently through balance, care, rhythm, beauty, and attention to human needs, both physical and emotional. The sun slowly rises higher now beyond the walls. Warm golden light spreads across the marble terraces, while the last stars disappear quietly overhead. Servants begin opening lattice screens. Water sparkles brighter. The garden fully awakens. Yet despite the coming day, a deep calm still lingers everywhere around you. Inside the fountains, inside the cypress shadows, inside the cool stone pathways carrying the memory of the night. You slow your steps. Your breathing softens. The garden seems to exhale gently with you. And now, as the morning light settles over this ancient paradise of water and shade, your own thoughts begin drifting farther away too. The fountains become softer, the birds more distant, the marble warm beneath early sunlight, the breeze gentler with every breath. You feel the last traces of wakefulness loosening quietly like petals falling onto still water. The Persian garden fades slowly into soft colors and flowing sound, into cool air, into moonlit pools now touched by dawn, into the endless patient murmur of water moving beneath the desert earth. And somewhere between the fading stars and the first golden light of morning, you finally allow yourself to rest completely. Open quote, open quote, open quote, end of script. Sweet dreams. Close quote, close quote, close quote.